The Italian game is near and dear to my heart, but it is also a great weapon for any aspiring chess player. It has recently been the opening choice for many grandmasters. So many versatile positions can stem from this ancient opening, and today I'll show you the Italian game. The Italian is one of the greatest openings in chess, and it's stuck around for so long for many reasons. Let's show you the Italian. Starting with e4, your opponent's going to play e5, the most common response, and you're going to play the most common move here, knight f3, and knight c6 from your opponent. And this is the most common position after two moves in chess. And you have a few options here. The Ruy Lopez, you also have the Scotch, and the Ponziani. But the opening we're going to look at today is the Italian, which is bishop to c4. Now, let's talk about this position before we get any deeper. Main ideas of the Italian are to create a direct attack against your opponent on the king side. And you are going to primarily target this f7 pawn, as well as playing for the idea of c3 and d4 in the game. Your pieces are going to be rerouted to the king side, so you can create an attack, and you're going to use this f5 square that you secured with your first move, e4. Now, there's a lot of different ways to continue in this position theoretically for your opponent. There's bishop e7, but the main two moves are knight to f6 and bishop c5. And we're going to go over both of those moves. And another thing you need to know about the Italian is that it is semi-theoretical, but mainly the Italian is based off of move orders. So every position can look very similar, but be slightly different by just one move, or the moves are played in different order, and it can change drastically how your response should be. So say, for example, your opponent plays knight to f6 here. Well, they've created an attack against our pawn. We must respond. So the appropriate response in this position is either d3, which is the move that I like to play, or the very aggressive knight to g5. This is also known as the start to the fried liver. Now let's go over this before we get into the main lines with d3. Now this is called the knight attack by chess.com, but it goes into a line that is called the fried liver by many. And the idea is very simple. You're creating a double attack against this weak f7 pawn, and your opponent has to respond to this immediately. And there's only really one good move for your opponent in this position that doesn't give you an advantage, and that is d5. And a seasoned opponent will find this move immediately, and you're going to play e takes d5. And another only move scenario, black should find knight a5. This is the common theoretical move, and then there's a bunch of theory that goes to a position like this. Now this is if your opponent plays perfectly. Let's see what happens if they mess up. Well, the most common move here at the beginner levels is this knight takes d5 move, and this is a grave mistake because of this crazy sacrifice, knight takes f7. And this move is insane, first of all, because you're threatening immediately a fork on the rook and the queen, and your opponent has to respond by capturing with the king, and you can give this nasty check, queen f3, and then you get king to e6, followed up by knight c3. So this position is completely lost for black because white is going to win this knight through a check, and yeah, it is absolutely nasty. Black is in a world of hurt, and they have a big weak pawn in the center as well. This is going to end very badly for black. So this is the kind of trap that you can play for if you'd like to play very aggressive with your openings. And this is the kind of trap that especially works well at beginner levels. But if you're looking to play something a little more solid and a lot more positional, I prefer this move d3. And d3 is nice because, first of all, you're opening up your bishop as well as defending your e4 pawn. You're also opening up the d2 square, which might not seem that pertinent for the knight, not like a great square, but very often in the Italian you are going to play this move c3. So having the d2 square open for your knight to transfer to the king side is very important. Right, and one of the most common moves here is bishop c5, and these lines can transpose into each other, the knight f6 and bishop c5 lines. Opponent goes bishop c5, and we have a few options here. And I like, whenever my opponent plays bishop c5, I like to consider the move c3 if I haven't already played it. Why is c3 good? Well, first of all, c3 prepares b4, which is a nice move that can sometimes trap your opponent's bishop if they're not careful. Like, for example, opponent here plays d6, and we play a4, gaining space on the queen side, and our opponent just nonchalant castles, and we can actually win a bishop with b4 and a5 here, or at least yeah, we can win a lot of material here, whether it be the knight and the bishop or just the bishop. The opponent is going to lose a lot here, and they may even be forced to capture back with the c-pawn if they allow us to capture them. So little things like this are what make the Italian special. You can play on the queen side. You can also find tactics on the king side very quickly. For example, let's castle, and opponent castles. Our knight is going to jump over. But let's start with rook e1. This is a very common move. Remember, the other idea is not only just to move your pieces over to the king side and attack through this f5 square, but you also want to play d4. And when your opponent hasn't moved their dark square bishop yet, you can play d4 with a lot of tempo. So here we're defending our e4 pawn so that d4 is a possibility on the next move. And our opponent may play, I don't know, bishop d7. And here d4 is an option we have to consider, one that could be very pertinent. Another idea that black plays a lot, and also white, is the ideas of h3 and h6. These are symmetrical moves that, first of all, stop the bishops from coming in and pinning. So yeah, it stops this bishop, stops this bishop. And not only that, but you're creating a pawn hook. Now this pawn hook is beneficial to your opponent because you can use it to sacrifice pieces. Like, say for example, we made a battery here. We could sacrifice our bishop and get our queen in an excellent position, as well as creating an opportunity for pawns to come forward and open up the board. And these are only very dangerous when you're castled on opposite sides. So be careful when you're making one of these moves, because if your opponent castles to the other side, they can launch their pawns at you and create complete havoc for you. But alright, that's just one idea, and many ideas in the Italian opening. And that's the other thing about the Italian. Lots of ideas that you need to understand. Like, for example, creating room for your bishop. A lot of times in the Italian, it is semi-symmetrical. People will try to challenge your bishop. You want to create room for it or be able to reroute it. So, for example, on this move, I can drop my bishop back to b3. In case of this move, bishop e6 coming, I can redeploy my bishop to c2. And c2 is a nice square that we created when we played c3. And it's going to be a bishop that looks kind of passive for now, but this bishop is artificially protecting f5, and when we play d4, this is going to be protecting our pawn here, as well as when we get the opportunity to play e5, we'll have a nice bishop attacking on the diagonal, be able to play queen to d3, create a battery. We'll have all sorts of attacking opportunities. So this bishop, while it looks kind of poor for now, is going to develop into one of our strongest attacking pieces. Another thing about the Italian, it's very, very versatile. You can play it in a bunch of different ways. You can create a full queenside pawn storm, breaking down your opponent's defenses and getting lots of room for your pieces. You can find new ways to develop your pieces. So your bishop can come out in here and pin. It can also go to e3. It also can be fianchettoed in a lot of positions where you can create pressure on the center. And here our opponent has a strong center, so it's not really great to fianchetto. But you can find different opportunities for your pieces through using creative thought. For example, this knight here can go the normal route all the way to g3, but it can also sometimes come in like this, or even come into c4 and create pressure. So using your ideas and taking every move that your opponent makes and trying to think about what weaknesses it creates, what weaknesses that you may be able to exploit. That's what a versatile opening like the Italian is about. So I'll show you a typical idea here, starting with this. Let's make a move for black. Starting with this knight d2 move. This is a very common maneuver you need to know. Knight b1 to d2, then to f1, and then to g3. And then of course your landing spot is eventually going to be this awesome square on f5. And your other knight may come to h4 just to protect that square again. That way you've got double protection on that square, and you're going to be able to create a stronghold for a knight on that square. Of course, you're trying to encourage this g3 move because then this pawn becomes weak and your bishop is targeting that pawn. So I'll make another move for black. Knight f1. Let's make another move for black. Knight to g3. The concept of time is very important in any e4 opening because you're seconds away from creating an attack or being attacked. So here, d4 will be the move of choice. Let's make a move for black. And we're going to start steamrolling our opponent in the center, winning tempos all over the board. Here we win a full pawn. Our knight is in a great position. This pawn may advance and allow this bishop to open up. This bishop is already opened up. Our queens are negotiating along the file here. And we may even develop our bishop and hope to get another rook to the center of the board after queens are traded. So all sorts of pieces are being traded here, and we're hoping to eke out an advantage that can win us the game. Alright, so whether you're an aggressive player with the Italian or a very positional player, you have options. And that's the best part about the Italian. Your opponent may not allow you to go into the fried liver by playing this bishop c5 move first. But once you've understood the positional ideas behind a lot of these gioco piano, and they call these lines the gioco piano lines, also known as the quiet game. And these lines, as I was showing you earlier, are very complicated, but they have a lot of common themes that you can learn. And you can improvise. You can come up with creative ideas, make your own game of chess, not just follow the playbook of somebody else. And I think that's one of the most amazing things you can do in chess, is coming up with brilliant ideas that end up working in your favor, something your opponent might not necessarily be familiar with. That is how you play chess to the fullest. I hope you guys enjoyed this rundown of the Italian opening. It's an opening that's very near and dear to my heart, and when you play it, just remember to play as yourself, play chess for fun, and have a good time. Play a move that you've never thought of before, something that's creative, something that has an idea behind it, and if it doesn't work out, check it with the engine and see what's wrong with it. Experimenting is the only way to do well in this opening, because this is the opening where grandmasters, where all sorts of experienced chess players are coming up with new ideas all the time. This is where people are breaking ground. And it's so fascinating because this is an opening that's 500 years old, one of the oldest chess openings there is, and people are still coming up with new ideas. That's why I love chess. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. It's the Chess Strategist signing off.